I never thought I'd find myself staring into a glass of wine, wondering if it was poisoned. The dining room was warm, the kind of warmth that comes from too many bodies packed around a table, pretending to celebrate. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, sat at the head, her smile as sharp as the crystal goblet she raised to toast. To family, she said, her voice dripping with honeyed venom. Everyone echoed her, their glasses clinking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The way her eyes lingered on me, the way her lips twitched when I reached for my drink, it wasn't right. I'd been married to her son, Daniel, for 3 years. And every day of those 3 years, Evelyn had made it clear I wasn't good enough. Not for him. Not for her family. Not for the pristine legacy she'd built in her sprawling Connecticut estate, where every room screamed money and control. Tonight was no different. Except it was. Tonight, I saw her slip something into my glass when she thought no one was looking. The dinner was a farce. A supposed reconciliation after months of cold silence. Daniel had insisted we come. Said his mother wanted to mend things. I didn't believe it. But I loved him. So I sat there, surrounded by his sisters, his father, Richard, and a handful of cousins who all looked at me like I was an intruder. The table was set with perfection white linens, silver cutlery, candles flickering like they were mocking me. I played my part, smiling, nodding, but my eyes kept darting to Evelyn. She was watching me, her gaze a blade slicing through the polite chatter. When she passed me the wine, her fingers brushed mine, deliberate and cold. I took the glass, my heart pounding. I'd seen her earlier, in the kitchen, when she thought I was still upstairs. A small vial, a quick shake into my drink before she topped it with Merlot. I didn't know what it was: sedative, poison, something worse, but I knew it wasn't meant to make me feel welcome. I held the glass, the ruby liquid catching the candlelight. My mind raced. Why now? What had I done to push her this far? I tried to fit in, tried to love her son the way she wanted. But nothing was ever enough. Daniel was laughing at something his sister Claire said, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. Richard, Evelyn's husband, sat across from me, his face tired, his eyes distant. He'd always been kind, in his quiet way, but he was under her thumb, a shadow of the man he might have been. I looked at my glass again, then at his. An idea sparked, reckless and dangerous, but it felt like justice. If Evelyn wanted to play dirty, I'd play dirtier. I leaned forward, pretending to adjust my napkin, and swapped my glass with Richard's. My hands shook, but no one noticed. The table was too busy with their own conversations, their own lies. The swap was quick, seamless. Richard didn't even glance at his glass as he raised it to his lips. I watched, my breath caught in my throat. As he took a sip, Evelyn's eyes flicked to him, then to me, and for a moment, I thought she knew. But she didn't. She couldn't. I leaned back, forcing a smile, my heart a drumbeat in my chest. If she wanted to hurt me, let her poison touch her own. Let her see what it felt like to lose control. The thought was intoxicating, a rush of power I hadn't felt in years. I'd spent so long bending to her will, swallowing her insults, pretending I didn't hear the whispers about my background, my lack of pedigree. Now, I was fighting back, and it felt good. Too good. Richard coughed. A small sound, barely noticeable. I froze. My eyes locked on him. Was it starting already? Had I miscalculated? The room spun, the candlelight blurring into streaks of gold. Daniel reached for my hand under the table, his touch warm and grounding. But it only made the guilt creep in. What had I done? I didn't know what was in that glass. Didn't know how bad it could be. Richard took another sip, and I wanted to scream, to knock the glass from his hand. But I couldn't. Not without exposing myself. Not without exposing her. Evelyn was still watching. Her smile tighter now, like she was waiting for something to happen. To me. The dinner dragged on. Each course a new kind of torture. I pushed food around my plate. My appetite gone. Richard seemed fine. Or at least, he wasn't collapsing. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe the vial was nothing. A trick to scare me. But I knew better. Evelyn didn't play games without a purpose. She wanted me gone out of Daniel's life. Out of her family. I'd heard her once, whispering to Claire that I was a mistake. That Daniel deserved better. I'd cried that night. But now, I was done crying. I was done being her victim. I glanced at Richard again. His face pale but steady. He caught my eye and offered a small, tired smile. I looked away, guilt gnawing at me. He didn't deserve this. But neither did I. The night wore on, and the tension grew thicker. A storm waiting to break. Evelyn's composure never faltered. But I could see the cracks her fingers tapping the table. Her eyes darting to Richard's glass. She thought it was mine. She thought she'd won. I wanted to laugh. To scream. To throw the truth in her face. But I held it in. Let her wait. Let her wonder. The power was mine now. And I wasn't letting go. Richard took another sip. And my heart lurched. What had I set in motion? Was this justice? Or had I become the monster I despised? The room felt smaller. The air heavier. And I knew this night would change everything. For better or worse. There was no going back. The candles burned lower, their flames casting long shadows across the dining room. The chatter around the table had softened, replaced by the clink of silverware and the occasional forced laugh. I couldn't tear my eyes away from Richard. He was still sipping from the glass I'd swapped, each swallow a quiet accusation. My stomach churned, a mix of fear and defiance. I hadn't meant to drag him into this. But what choice did I have? Evelyn had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. Her eyes kept flicking toward me, expecting something: weakness, collapse, proof that her plan had worked. But I sat there, untouched, my own glass of water a silent rebellion. She didn't know yet, didn't realize the game had shifted. Daniel's hand rested on my knee, a gesture meant to comfort. But it only made me feel more alone. He didn't see his mother for what she was. To him, Evelyn was strict. Sure, but loving in her own way. He didn't hear the venom in her voice when she spoke to me. Didn't see the way she'd orchestrated every family event to remind me I didn't belong. 3 years ago, when we got engaged, she'd pulled me aside and told me I'd never be one of them. You're a phase, she'd said, her voice cold as marble. Daniel will see that eventually. I'd spent every day since proving her wrong. But tonight, I realized I'd never win her approval. She didn't just want me gone, she wanted me erased. Richard coughed again, louder this time, and the table fell silent for a moment. Evelyn's head snapped toward him, her smile faltering. Are you all right, dear? She asked, her voice too sweet, too concerned. Richard waved her off, muttering something about the wine being strong. My heart raced. Was it the wine? Or was it whatever she'd slipped into my glass? I didn't know what she'd used. Didn't know if it was meant to kill or just humiliate. The uncertainty was a knife in my gut, twisting with every second. I wanted to undo it, to switch the glasses back. But it was too late. The deed was done, and now I was complicit, tethered to the consequences of my own desperation. I tried to focus on the conversation, on Claire's story about her new job, on Daniel's cousin joking about his golf game. But it all felt distant, like I was watching through a fogged window. My mind kept replaying the moment I'd swapped the glasses, me hands moving fast, my pulse hammering, the thrill of turning Evelyn's trap against her. It had felt righteous then, a way to protect myself, to show her I wasn't helpless. But now, watching Richard's face grow paler, I wasn't so sure. He was innocent, or as innocent as anyone could be in this family. He'd never stood up to Evelyn, never challenged her reign, but he'd never hurt me either. His kindness, however small, was real, and I'd betrayed it. Evelyn stood to clear the plates, her movements precise, controlled. She was always in control, always the queen of her domain. But tonight, something was off. Her hands trembled slightly as she stacked the dishes, her eyes darting to Richard again. Did she suspect? Did she know? I couldn't tell, but the thought sent a chill down my spine. If she figured it out, what would she do? Confront me? Expose me? Or worse, would she double down? Find another way to get rid of me? I gripped my water glass, the cold condensation grounding me. I had to stay sharp, had to keep playing the game I'd started. Daniel leaned over, his breath warm against my ear. You okay, Liv? He asked, his voice soft with concern. I forced a smile, nodding, but inside, I was screaming. How could I tell him? How could I explain that his mother had tried to poison me, that I turned it on his father instead? He'd never believe me. He'd think I was paranoid, delusional, just like Evelyn always said. I glanced at her, now back at the head of the table, pouring more wine for everyone but me. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something fear, maybe, or calculation. She was trying to read me, trying to figure out why I wasn't reacting the way she'd planned. Richard stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. Excuse me, he muttered, his voice hoarse. He swayed slightly, one hand gripping the table for support. My heart stopped. The room turned to him, concern rippling through the air. Evelyn was at his side in an instant, her arm around him, her face a mask of worry. But I saw through it. She wasn't worried about him, she was worried about her plan unraveling. I'm fine, Richard said, brushing her off. But his steps were unsteady as he headed toward the hallway. I wanted to follow, to make sure he was okay. But I couldn't. Not without drawing attention. Not without giving myself away. The dinner resumed. But the mood had shifted. The cousins exchanged glances. Claire whispered something to Daniel, and Evelyn sat back down, her composure cracking. I watched her, my mind racing. What did she put in that glass? How long would it take to work? And what would happen when it did? I'd wanted to hurt her, to make her feel the fear she'd inflicted on me. But now I was trapped in my own scheme, waiting for the fallout. Richard's absence loomed over the table, a ghost I'd summoned. I told myself this was justice, that Evelyn deserved to face the consequences of her cruelty. But as the minutes ticked by, the line between justice and vengeance blurred, and I wondered if I'd crossed it. Richard didn't return to the table. The empty chair across from me felt like an accusation, its silence louder than the forced laughter filling the room. Evelyn's eyes kept darting to the hallway, her fingers twisting the stem of her wine glass. She was unraveling, her perfect facade slipping with every minute that passed. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was dread. What had I done? The swap had been impulsive, a split-second decision born of fear and fury. But now it was real, and Richard was out there, somewhere, maybe suffering because of me. I wanted to run after him, to confess everything. But I was rooted to my seat, trapped by my own choices. Daniel noticed my tension, his hand squeezing mine under the table. "You sure you're okay?" he whispered, his brow furrowed. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. How could I tell him the truth? That his mother had tried to poison me, that I'd redirected her trap to his father. He'd never forgive me, not for doubting her, not for endangering Richard. He loved his family, flaws and all, and I'd always envied that loyalty. My own family was a fractured thing. A mother who left when I was 10. A father who drank himself into oblivion. Daniel's world, with its polished surfaces and hidden knives, was the closest I'd come to belonging. But now, I'd shattered that illusion, and there was no going back. Evelyn stood again, excusing herself with a tight smile. "I'll check on Richard," she said. Her voice clipped. The room barely noticed. The cousins deep in a debate about politics. Claire scrolling on her phone. I watched Evelyn disappear down the hallway, my pulse racing. Was she checking on him? Or covering her tracks? Did she suspect the swap? My mind spun with possibilities, each worse than the last. If Richard was hurt, if he collapsed, they'd find out what was in that glass. They'd trace it back to hear it to me. I hadn't thought this through, hadn't considered the consequences beyond the moment of defiance. Now, I was drowning in them. I pushed my chair back, mumbling something about needing the bathroom. Daniel gave me a concerned look, but didn't stop me. The hallway was dim, the estate's grandeur muted in the shadows. I heard voices Evelyn's, low and urgent, and Richard's, weak but steady. I crept closer, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. They were in the study, the door slightly ajar. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to listen. "You're fine, Richard," Evelyn was saying, her tone sharp. "It's just the wine. You've had too much." His response was slurred, barely audible. "Don't feel right. Dizzy." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just the wine. It was whatever she'd meant for me. I wanted to burst in, to demand answers. But fear held me back. What if Richard was dying? What if I'd killed him? The thought was a punch to the chest, stealing my breath. I'd only wanted to protect myself, to turn Evelyn's cruelty back on her. But I hadn't meant for this. Richard didn't deserve to be collateral damage. He'd always been kind to me, in his quiet, defeated way small gestures, like asking about my work or offering a smile when Evelyn's barbs cut too deep. I'd betrayed that kindness, and the weight of it was crushing. Evelyn's voice grew sharper. "Lie down, Richard. I'll get you some water." Her footsteps approached the door, and I ducked into a nearby alcove, my heart hammering. She passed by, her face pale but composed. A predator in control. I waited until she was gone, then slipped into the study. Richard was slumped in an armchair, his face gray, his breathing shallow. "Richard," I whispered, kneeling beside him. His eyes fluttered open, confused but alive. "Liv," he mumbled, his voice thick. "What's happening?" I didn't know how to answer. Guilt clawed at me, but so did fear. If I told him the truth, everything would unravel me. Marriage, my life, everything I'd fought for. "I'm going to get help," I said, my voice shaking. But before I could move, he grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "Evelyn," he rasped, his eyes searching mine. "She's not right. Be careful." His words hit me like a shockwave. Did he know? Had he seen her slip something into the glass? Or was he just warning me about her in general, the way he'd hinted at her control over the years? I didn't have time to ask. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Evelyn was coming back. I pulled away, my mind racing. I had to act. Had to do something. But what? I slipped out of the study, my heart a wild thing in my chest. Evelyn was halfway down the hall, a glass of water in her hand, her expression unreadable. She saw me and froze, her eyes narrowing. "Olivia," she said, her voice like ice. "What are you doing here?" I forced a smile, my hands trembling. "Just checking on Richard," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "He doesn't look good." Her lips twitched, a flicker of something, anger, fear. I couldn't tell. "He's fine," she snapped. "Go back to the table." But I didn't move. I held her gaze, letting her see that I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The game had changed, and I was playing to win. The air in the hallway was thick with tension. A silent battle waged in the space between Evelyn and me. Her eyes bore into mine, searching for weakness. But I held my ground, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and defiance. She didn't know about the swap knot yet, but her suspicion was a living thing, coiling around us. The glass of water in her hand trembled slightly, betraying her calm facade. I wanted to scream at her, to demand why she hated me so much, why she'd go to such lengths to get rid of me. But I couldn't. Not here. Not now. With Richard struggling in the next room and the rest of the family oblivious at the table. I turned and walked back to the dining room, my steps measured, my mind racing. Evelyn followed, her presence a shadow at my back. The table was quieter now, the cousins' laughter fading, Claire's phone forgotten. Daniel looked up as I sat down, his eyes searching mine. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, forcing a smile, but my hands were shaking under the table. I could feel Evelyn's gaze on me, sharp as a blade, as she took her seat. She didn't go back to Richard, didn't check on him again. That alone told me she knew something was wrong. She was waiting, calculating, trying to piece together why her plan hadn't worked. The dessert course arrived, a tiramisu that no one touched. The mood was heavy, the earlier pretense of celebration gone. I kept glancing at the hallway, expecting Richard to stumble back, or worse, for someone to find him collapsed. My guilt was a weight, pressing down on me, but so was my anger. Evelyn had started this. She'd tried to hurt me, maybe kill me, and I'd only done what I had to. But had I? The question gnawed at me, eating away at the certainty I'd felt when I swapped the glasses. Richard's warning echoed in my head, "Be careful." He knew something, or at least suspected. But what? And how much? Claire broke the silence, her voice sharp. "Where's Dad?" she asked, looking at Evelyn. "He's been gone a while." Evelyn's smile was tight, practiced. "He's resting," she said. "Too much wine. I'm afraid." Her eyes flicked to me, a challenge hidden in their depths. I wanted to call her out, to expose her right there, but I had no proof. Just a vial-eyed scene, a moment of sleight of hand, and a glass I'd swapped in a panic. If I accused her now, it'd be my word against hers, and I knew who this family would believe. I excused myself again, unable to sit still. This time, I went to the kitchen, needing space to breathe, to think. The room was pristine, all gleaming counters and stainless steel, a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. I leaned against the sink, my hands gripping the edge, trying to steady myself. I'd crossed a line tonight, one I couldn't uncross. But so had Evelyn. She'd wanted me gone, and I'd turned her weapon against her. But at what cost? Richard's face, pale and confused, haunted me. I didn't know what was in that glass. Didn't know if he'd be okay. The uncertainty was torture, worse than anything Evelyn could have planned. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around. It was Daniel, his face etched with worry. "Liv, what's going on?" he asked, stepping closer. "You're acting strange. Is it Mom? Did she say something?" I wanted to tell him everything, to spill the truth and let him hold me. But I couldn't. Not yet. "I'm just tired," I lied, my voice barely steady. He didn't buy it. I could tell. But he didn't push. Instead, he pulled me into his arms, his warmth a fleeting comfort. "I love you," he said, his voice soft. "Whatever's wrong, we'll fix it." But I wasn't sure we could. Not this time. The kitchen door swung open, and Evelyn stood there, her eyes cold. "Daniel, could you give us a moment?" she asked, her tone leaving no room for argument. He hesitated, looking between us, but nodded and left. The door closed behind him, and the silence was deafening. Evelyn stepped closer, her presence suffocating. "You're tougher than I thought," she said, her voice low, almost admiring. "But you're out of your depth, Olivia." My blood ran cold. Did she know? Had she figured it out? I forced myself to meet her gaze, refusing to back down. "I could say the same about you," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. Her lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't warm. It was a predator's smile, calculating and cruel. "Be careful, dear," she said, echoing Richard's warning, but with a different weight. "You don't know what you're playing with." She turned and left, her words hanging in the air like a threat. I stood there, my heart pounding, my mind racing. She knew something, or at least suspected. The game wasn't over, it was just beginning. And I had to decide how far I was willing to go to win. The kitchen felt colder after Evelyn left, her words lingering like a poison of their own. I stood there, gripping the counter, trying to piece together what she knew, what she suspected. Did she realize I'd swapped the glasses? Or was she just fishing, trying to rattle me? My mind was a storm of questions, each one sharper than the last. Richard was still out there, possibly suffering, and I was the one who'd put him in danger. The guilt was suffocating, but so was the fear. If Evelyn knew what I'd done, she'd use it against me. She'd turn the family against me, paint me as the villain. And Daniel would he believe her over me? I forced myself to move, to return to the dining room before anyone noticed how long I'd been gone. The table was nearly empty now, the cousins drifting toward the living room with their drinks, Claire helping the staff clear the dishes. Daniel was waiting for me, his eyes searching mine as I sat down. "What did Mom want?" he asked, his voice low, wary. I shrugged, forcing a casual tone. "Just checking on me," I said, hating the lie. He frowned but didn't push, and I was grateful. I didn't have the strength to deflect more questions. Evelyn reappeared, her composure restored, her smile as polished as ever. She announced that Richard was resting upstairs, that he'd be fine by morning. The cousins nodded, accepting her words without question, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes avoided mine. She was lying, or at least hiding something. I wanted to go to Richard, to see for myself, but I couldn't, not without drawing suspicion. Instead, I played along, sipping my water, nodding at the small talk, all while my mind screamed for answers. The evening wound down, the family dispersing to their rooms or the patio for late-night drinks. Daniel and I were staying the night, a decision I now regretted. The idea of sleeping under Evelyn's roof, knowing what she'd tried to do, made my skin crawl. But leaving now would look strange, and I needed to stay close, to watch her, to figure out her next move. Daniel took my hand as we headed upstairs, his touch a lifeline I didn't deserve. "Let's get some rest," he said, his voice gentle. I nodded, but rest was the last thing I'd find tonight. Our room was at the end of the hall, far from Richard and Evelyn's. I waited until Daniel was in the shower, the sound of water muffling my movements, before slipping back into the hallway. I had to see Richard, had to know if he was okay. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels alive, like it's holding its breath. I moved quickly, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. Richard's room was on the second floor, the door closed but not locked. I hesitated, my hand on the knob, fear and guilt warring inside me. What if he was worse? What if he was gone? I pushed the thought away and opened the door. He was lying on the bed, his face pale but breathing steady. Relief flooded me, followed by a fresh wave of guilt. He stirred as I approached, his eyes opening, glassy but alert. "Liv," he whispered, his voice weak. I knelt beside him, my heart in my throat. "I'm here," I said softly. "How do you feel?" He frowned, his brow furrowing. "Strange, lightheaded, like I'm floating." He reached for my hand, his grip shaky. "What happened?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I froze. I couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. But lying felt wrong too. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm going to find out." His eyes held mine, and for a moment, I thought he'd press me, demand answers. But he just nodded, his grip loosening. "Be careful," he said again, his voice fading. I stayed there, watching him breathe, until I heard footsteps in the hall. I slipped out, closing the door behind me, my heart racing. The hallway was empty, but I felt eyes on me, a presence I couldn't shake. Evelyn was out there, watching, waiting. I hurried back to our room, my mind a tangle of fear and determination. I'd started this, and now I had to finish it. Back in our room, Daniel was out of the shower, toweling off, his expression soft but concerned. "Where'd you go?" he asked, pulling me close. I leaned into him, needing his warmth, even if I didn't deserve it. "Just needed some air," I said, my voice muffled against his chest. He didn't push, but I could feel his worry, a weight that matched my own. I climbed into bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Evelyn had tried to hurt me, and I turned it back on her. But the cost was too high. Richard was suffering, and I was complicit. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I'd find proof, expose her, and make her pay. The night stretched on, endless and heavy, and I knew sleep wouldn't come. The house was silent in the early hours, the kind of silence that amplifies every creak, every whisper of wind against the windows. I lay beside Daniel, his steady breathing a stark contrast to the storm in my chest. My mind wouldn't rest, replaying the night's events, the vial, the swap, Richard's pale face, Evelyn's cold stare. I'd crossed a line, but so had she, and I wasn't going to let her win. I needed proof, something concrete to show what she'd done, to protect myself and maybe save Richard. The thought of him lying upstairs, struggling because of me, was a knife in my gut, but I pushed it down. Guilt wouldn't help me now. Action would. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Daniel. The hallway was dark, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and wax. I moved toward the kitchen, where I'd seen Evelyn with the vial. If she'd hidden it, That's where it would be. The kitchen was as pristine as before, the counters gleaming in the moonlight. I started searching, quietly opening drawers, checking cabinets, my hands shaking with every sound. The vial was small, easy to hide, but I had to find it. It was my only chance to prove what she'd done. A noise behind me made me freeze a soft shuffle, like footsteps. I turned, my heart in my throat, but no one was there. The doorway was empty, the house still. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves, but the feeling of being watched clung to me. I kept searching, my fingers brushing against jars of spices, bottles of oil, until I found a small drawer near the sink. Inside was a velvet pouch, and inside that, the vial. It was tiny, no bigger than my thumb, with a few drops of clear liquid left. My heart raced. This was it, proof. But proof of what? I didn't know what was in it. Didn't know how to test it without risking everything. I slipped the vial into my pocket, my mind racing. I needed to get it analyzed. But how? And who could I trust? The police. A lab. The thought of explaining this to anyone, of admitting what I'd done, terrified me. But I couldn't stop now. I closed the drawer, my hand steadier now, and turned to leave. That's when I saw her, Evelyn, standing in the doorway, her silhouette sharp against the dim light. My breath caught, my body tensing. Looking for something? She asked, her voice low. Dangerous. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my expression neutral. Couldn't sleep, I said, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at me. Thought I'd get some water. Her eyes narrowed, her gaze flicking to my hands, then back to my face. She didn't believe me, but she didn't call me out. Instead, she stepped closer, her presence suffocating. You should be careful, Olivia, she said, her voice a soft threat. Poking around where you don't belong can get you hurt. The words were a warning, but they only fueled my resolve. She knew I was onto her, and that made her dangerous, but it also made her vulnerable. I brushed past her, my heart pounding, and headed back to our room. The vial felt heavy in my pocket, a secret that could destroy everything. I needed to hide it, to keep it safe until I could figure out what to do. Back in our room, Daniel was still asleep, oblivious to the war raging around him. I tucked the vial into my suitcase, behind a zipper pocket, and climbed back into bed, my mind spinning. I had evidence now, but it wasn't enough. I needed to know what was in it. Needed to know how far Evelyn was willing to go. Morning came too soon, the light filtering through the curtains harsh and unforgiving. Daniel stirred, his arm pulling me close, but I couldn't relax. I needed to check on Richard, to see if he was okay, to ease the guilt eating at me. We dressed and went downstairs, where the family was gathered for breakfast. Evelyn was there, her smile as polished as ever, but Richard was absent. He's still resting, she said, her tone dismissive, but I saw the tension in her jaw. I excused myself, ignoring Daniel's questioning look, and headed upstairs. Richard was awake, sitting up in bed, his face still pale but clearer than before. Liv, he said, his voice stronger now. You're back. I nodded, sitting beside him, my heart heavy. How are you feeling? I asked, searching his face for answers. He sighed, his eyes distant. Better, I think. But something's not right. I don't know what happened last night. He paused, his gaze sharpening. Do you? The question hung between us, heavy with unspoken truths. I wanted to tell him, to confess everything, but fear stopped me. Instead, I squeezed his hand. I'm going to figure it out. I promised. And I meant it. For him. For me. For the truth. Breakfast was a blur. The family's chatter a dull roar in my ears. I sat next to Daniel, my hands wrapped around a coffee mug, but I couldn't drink. The vial in my suitcase felt like a ticking bomb, its presence a constant reminder of the line I'd crossed. Evelyn was across the table, her eyes avoiding mine, her smile a mask for the tension beneath. She was playing her part, the perfect matriarch, but I could see the cracks her fingers tapping the table. Her laugh too sharp. She knew I was a threat now, and that made her dangerous. But I wasn't backing down. Not after what she'd done. Not after what I'd done to protect myself. Richard joined us halfway through, his steps slow but steady. Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. He was alive, but he wasn't okay. His face was still pale, his eyes heavy with something more than exhaustion. He sat beside Evelyn, offering a weak smile to the table, and I wondered what he knew, what he suspected. His warning from last night, "Be careful," echoed in my mind. Did he know about the vial? Had he seen her, too? I needed to talk to him, to get him alone. But Evelyn was watching, her gaze a silent warning. The morning dragged on, the family scattering to their routines. Daniel wanted to take a walk, to clear our heads. But I couldn't leave. Not with the vial hidden upstairs and Evelyn circling like a shark. I told him I needed to rest, that I'd join him later. He kissed my forehead, his touch warm but heavy with worry, and left with Claire. I waited until the house was quiet, then slipped upstairs to Richard's room. He was alone, staring out the window, his expression distant. "Liv," he said, turning as I entered. "You keep showing up." There was a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I closed the door, my heart racing. "Richard, I need to know what happened last night," I said, my voice low. He frowned, his hands folding in his lap. "I don't know," he said slowly. I felt off, dizzy, weak, like something was wrong with the wine. He paused, his eyes searching mine. "You were there, Liv. Did you see something?" The question was a weight, pressing down on me. I wanted to tell him about the vial, about the swap, but the words stuck in my throat. If I told him, he'd confront Evelyn. And then what? She'd deny it, twist it, make me the villain. Instead, I asked, "Do you trust her?" The question hung between us, heavy and dangerous. His face darkened, his jaw tightening. "She's my wife," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "But you know how she is. Controlling. Always has to win." He looked away, his hands clenching. "I've let her run things for too long." His words were a confession, a crack in the facade of their perfect marriage. I leaned closer, my voice barely a whisper. "If you knew something, Richard, would you tell me?" He met my eyes, and for a moment, I saw the man he might have been: strong, principled, trapped by years of submission. "If I knew," he said, "I'd protect you." I left his room, my mind spinning. He didn't know about the vial, but he suspected something. And he was on my side. Or at least, he wasn't on hers. It was enough to keep going, to keep pushing. I needed to get the vial tested, to find out what was in it. But that meant leaving the house, risking Evelyn's suspicion. I went back to our room, checking the vial was still hidden, its weight a reminder of the stakes. I couldn't stay here, not with her watching, not with Richard's life hanging in the balance. I found Daniel outside, walking the estate's sprawling gardens. He smiled when he saw me, but it faded when he saw my face. "Liv," What's wrong? He asked, pulling me close. I wanted to tell him everything, to let him carry this with me. But I couldn't. Not yet. I need to run an errand, I said, my voice steady. I'll be back soon. He frowned, confused, but nodded. Be safe, he said, and the words felt like a plea. I kissed him, holding on a moment too long, then left, the vial burning a hole in my pocket. I drove to a small lab in town, one I'd found online, praying they could test the liquid without asking too many questions. The technician was young, bored, and didn't care why I needed the analysis. It'll take a day, he said, taking the vial. I nodded, my heart pounding. A day was too long, but I had no choice. I drove back, my mind racing with plans. If the vial was poison, I'd have proof. If it wasn't, I'd still have something to confront Evelyn with. Either way, I was done playing her game. I was ready to fight. The drive back to the estate was a blur. The vial's absence a strange relief and a new kind of fear. I'd handed over my only piece of evidence, trusting a stranger to uncover the truth. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing through what came next. If the vial contained poison, I could expose Evelyn, but it would mean admitting what I'd done swapping the glasses, endangering Richard. If it was something else, a sedative or a prank, I'd look paranoid, unhinged, just like she wanted. Either way, the truth was coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The estate loomed ahead, its grandeur a mockery of the chaos inside. I parked and slipped inside, hoping to avoid Evelyn. But she was waiting in the foyer, her arms crossed, her smile cold. Where did you go? Olivia, she asked, her voice sharp. I forced a casual shrug. Just needed some air, I said, echoing my earlier lie. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't press. Instead, she turned and walked away, leaving me with the sinking feeling that she was planning something worse. Daniel found me moments later, his face etched with worry. Liv, you're scaring me, he said, pulling me into the living room. What's going on? You've been acting strange all weekend. I wanted to tell him, to unload everything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I kissed him, needing his warmth, his belief in me. I'll explain soon, I promised, hating how vague it sounded. He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the first crack in our trust. It hurt more than I expected. The day passed in a haze of tension, every moment spent watching Evelyn, waiting for her to make a move. Richard was up and moving, looking better but still weak, his presence a constant reminder of my guilt. I avoided him, afraid he'd see the truth in my eyes. That night, I barely slept, my dreams filled with visions of Evelyn's smile, Richard's pale face, the vial's clear liquid. When morning came, I drove back to the lab, my heart pounding. The technician handed me a report, his face neutral. It's a sedative, he said. Strong, but not lethal. Enough to knock someone out for a while. Relief and rage surged through me. She hadn't meant to kill me, just humiliate me, make me look weak, unstable. But it was still a crime, and I had proof. Back at the estate, I found Evelyn alone in the study, her back to me as she sorted papers. I closed the door, the click loud in the silence. She turned, her eyes narrowing. Olivia, she said, her voice cold. What do you want? I held up the report, my hand steady now. I know what you did, I said, my voice low but firm. I saw you spike my drink, and I have proof. Her face paled, but she didn't flinch. You're delusional, she said, but there was a tremor in her voice. I stepped closer, my anger boiling over. I swapped the glasses. Evelyn. Richard drank it. That's why he's been sick. And now I know it was a sedative. I could go to the police. Or I could tell Daniel. Either way, you're done. For a moment, she was silent, her eyes searching mine. Then, to my shock, she laughed. A low, bitter sound. You're smarter than I gave you credit for, she said. But you're still a fool. You think this changes anything. Daniel will never believe you. This family is mine. Her words were a challenge, but I saw the fear in her eyes. She was cornered, and she knew it. I leaned in, my voice a whisper. Maybe, but I'm not going anywhere. And I'll make sure you pay for what you did. I left the study, my heart pounding but lighter. I found Daniel in the garden, his face softening as he saw me. Liv, talk to me, he said, his voice pleading. I took a deep breath and told him everything: the vial, the swap, the lab report. His face went from shock to anger to pain. But he listened. When I finished, he was silent, his hands clenched. I need to talk to her, he said finally, his voice hard. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I'd won. But at what cost? Later, Daniel confronted Evelyn, the argument echoing through the house. She denied it, but Richard overheard, his own anger breaking through years of silence. He confirmed my story, admitting he'd suspected her for years. The family fractured, loyalties shifting, but Daniel stood by me. Evelyn left the estate that night, her control shattered. I watched her go, feeling no triumph, only relief. Richard recovered, his gratitude a quiet bond between us. I'd sought revenge, but found something else: redemption. Not just for me, but for the truth. The family would heal. Slowly, but I'd made my place in it. And I'd never let anyone take it away again.